The monitors surrounding my mother's hospital bed droned with a soft, relentless hum, the background noise to my sleepless nights. Each beep tracked her faltering pulse, her shallow breaths. The room carried a faint whiff of disinfectant mingled with the stale scent of age, both clinical and sour. I sat slumped in the hard plastic chair beside her, my fingers gently resting on her hand. Her skin was thin as tissue paper, veins delicate and blue, and I marveled at how something so fragile had once carried me through my youth. I hadn't left her side in 4 days. The nurses cast kind glances my way, sometimes offering a foam cup of coffee, but mostly they left me to my watch. I didn't need anything except time, time she no longer had. In the midst of one of those endless silences, punctuated only by the machines, my phone buzzed. I nearly ignored it, assuming it was another distant relative checking in. But the name on the screen stopped me cold. Evelyn Harcourt, my boss, regional director at Atlas Consolidated. I answered quietly, careful not to disturb my mother, though she hadn't moved in hours. "Hello?" Evelyn's voice was crisp, all business. "Robert, where are you at? There's a leadership conference Monday, and your name's not on the roster." "My mother's dying," I said, keeping it simple, raw, because the truth should have been enough. "She doesn't have much time. I can't leave her." A brief pause crackled on the line, maybe 3 seconds, but it said everything. Then her voice cut through, sharp and icy. "Everyone's got their issues. Be here Monday or don't bother coming back." I sat there, staring at my mother's chest as it rose and fell, each breath a battle. I thought of the 30 years I'd poured into that company, 30 years without a single sick day, 30 years taking every assignment, no matter how sudden or grueling. 30 years of missed birthdays, scrapped vacations, meals eaten cold in lonely hotel rooms because Atlas demanded it. I thought of the awards collecting dust in my office, the speeches Evelyn herself gave praising my steadfast dedication. And then I thought of her words, "Everyone's got their issues," as if watching my mother's life fade was a minor nuisance. "My name's Robert Kane," I whispered to the empty air, 58, senior operations manager at Atlas Consolidated, 30 years of service. I looked at my mother's hand in mine and said, "I'm done with loyalty." I hung up without another word. My hand shook, but not from sorrow. It was something fiercer, more precise, taking root inside me. That night I stayed in the chair until my joints ached. A nurse touched my shoulder at some point, asking if I wanted to rest, but I shook my head. I wasn't leaving, not now, not ever. I leaned close to my mother, close enough that she might hear me through the haze of morphine and weariness. "I won't abandon you," I said. The words came out firm like a promise. "Not for them. Not for anyone." When dawn broke, pale and gray, I drove to Atlas anyway, not to plead, not to justify, to end it. The lobby smelled of wax and stale coffee, just as it always had. The receptionist glanced up, startled, as I walked in, still in the same shirt from the hospital. My tie was loose, my eyes red-rimmed. I didn't care. I stepped into the elevator and hit the button for the top floor. Each chime of ascent pulsed like a heartbeat in my chest. Evelyn was in her glass-walled office, framed by the cityscape she loved to boast about. She smiled when she saw me, a thin, victorious smirk like she'd already won. "I see you made the right call," she said. "No," I replied. "I came so you could say it to my face." Her smile wavered. "Say what?" "Fire me." For the first time in 30 years, I spoke without doubt, without fear of what came next. Just truth. Her eyes narrowed. She picked up a pen, tapped it on her desk, then set it down with a finality that echoed louder than the machines by my mother's bed. "Fine, you're fired. Effective immediately." No ceremony, no acknowledgement, not even a thank you. Just a cold sentence after 3 decades of devotion. I stood there, letting the silence linger, watching her scribble her signature like it was nothing. Then I turned and left, past the receptionist who avoided my gaze, past the framed photos of company milestones I'd bled for, past the security guard who didn't even nod. The morning air stung like ice as I stepped through the revolving doors. I thought I'd feel shattered, discarded, but I didn't. I felt something else, clearer, colder. Little did she know she'd just ignited the wrong man. I drove home with her words still echoing, louder than the engine's hum or the rush of traffic. Fired. 30 years reduced to a signature and a shrug. It should have felt like the end, but it felt like the start of something I hadn't touched in years. By the time I reached my driveway, the grief of what she'd taken was hardening into something sharper. The mask I'd worn for half my life was slipping, and for the first time in years I had no interest in holding it up. Most people thought they knew me. Robert Kane, 58, Senior Operations Manager at Atlas Consolidated. A man who arrived early, stayed late, followed rules, and collected service awards like clockwork. The kind of man you'd overlook until a crisis needed fixing, dependable, predictable, unremarkable. That was the story I let them believe. And it worked because the best disguises are the ones nobody questions. The truth was written in a different code, one not meant for public eyes. I was recruited fresh out of college. Back then, Atlas wasn't just a company. It was a conduit, a gateway to something deeper. A professor handed me a note after class, a scribbled address, nothing more. Show up, don't ask why. I thought it was a job interview. In a way, it was, just not the kind anyone admits exists. The Office of Special Liaison ran the operation. Not quite government, not fully private, but a murky blend of both. They placed people like me in Fortune 500 companies, men and women with spotless records and sharper instincts, tasked with keeping the decay from spreading too far. Corporate espionage, sabotage, foreign interference. Most people never realized how close the edge really was. We weren't there to climb the ranks. We were there to watch them, shore them up, and ensure no one saw the fractures. I was 22 when they put me through the ringer. Psychological stress tests, coded exercises, field training that left my hands trembling for days. They tore me apart and rebuilt me into someone who could smile in a meeting while spotting the traitor 3 chairs down. By 25, I was in my first Atlas cubicle, a stapler in one hand, an encrypted device in the other. By 30, I was stopping corporate sabotage that never hit the news. By 40, I'd blocked a data breach that could have sold defense plans to the highest bidder. And all the while, my coworkers thought I was just Rob from Ops, the guy who never missed a day and never caused a stir. I gave Atlas my best years, not because I loved the job, but because my mother needed security. After my father died young, she relied on me more than she let on. The benefits, the insurance, the steady pay, it mattered. So I stayed year after year, telling myself I'd walk away once she was set. Then the years piled up and I became part of the scenery. Loyal employee, company man, background noise. That's why Evelyn's betrayal cut so deep. She hadn't just fired me, she'd erased me. 3 decades of service and she wiped it out with a single line on a form. My badge would already be deactivated. My email gone. My name a whispered warning about what happens when you stop showing up. It wasn't just losing a job, it was annihilation. A man can survive being cast aside, but being erased, that's a different kind of wound. I pulled into the garage, cut the engine, and sat in the quiet. My reflection stared back from the rearview mirror, eyes tired but steady. Then I got out and walked to the back wall, past shelves cluttered with paint cans and old tools. To anyone else, it was just storage. To me, it was the opening line of a story I hadn't told in years. I pressed 2 fingers into the nook behind the breaker box. The panel clicked, then slid open, revealing a hidden keypad. I entered a code my hand still knew, though it had been years since I used it. The wall shifted with a low groan. Cold air poured out. Inside, the vault waited. 12 by 12, steel-reinforced, soundproof, lined with racks and cabinets. My true office. I stepped inside and flipped on the lights. The glow fell across encrypted servers humming quietly. Surveillance gear packed in custom foam, burner phones stacked neatly, and a wall of files that never existed in Atlas's official records. Every shady deal, every buried scandal, every hostile move the company ever made. I had the proof. For 30 years, I'd kept their secrets safe. I stopped threats before they reached the boardroom, erased evidence before regulators could sniff it out, and kept the machine running. They thought I was just an employee. They forgot who built the locks on their doors. The vault door sealed shut behind me, muffling the quiet suburban world outside. In here, time folded back to the man I used to be. The one who could stay awake 3 nights straight, decoding hostile signals while others slept soundly. I sat at the steel desk, powered up the servers, and watched the screens light up. The familiar interface greeted me. Systems I'd built myself years ago when I first joined Atlas. They were meant to be a safeguard. Tonight, they became a weapon. I started with the communication lines. Atlas boasted about its proprietary encryption, but I'd created the master key. Within minutes, I was inside their private channels, scrolling through messages, voice files, and buried calendar invites cloaked in corporate jargon. At first, it was mundane chatter. Logistics, quarterly projections, executive travel schedules, but patterns emerged. Names linked to invoices that didn't match the official books. Payments to consulting firms I'd never heard of. Shell companies registered offshore with flimsy histories. The deeper I dug, the colder my chest grew. Evelyn hadn't fired me just because I missed a week at my mother's side. She fired me because I was the only one who could see this, the only one who knew which shadows were harmless and which hid teeth. I opened a hidden channel and stopped cold. It was Evelyn's digital signature approving a $30 million contract transfer. The vendor listed was a logistics firm in Delaware, but the routing address bounced through 2 layers of proxies before landing in accounts tied to state-backed firms overseas. I checked the names again and again, hoping I was mistaken. I wasn't. The emails were worse. A thread from 6 months ago passed among senior directors discussed how to phase Kane out quietly, my name in stark text. Their reasons were listed like a checklist: unique system access, too much independent control, no external oversight. They'd planned to box me in, block promotions, and when the chance came, cut me loose. My absence at my mother's bedside hadn't been the reason, it had been the pretext. I leaned back in the chair, hands flat on the cold steel desk. For years, I'd told myself loyalty would mean something in the end. That if I kept my head down, did the work, saved the company from threats it never knew existed, there'd be recognition, respect, maybe gratitude. Instead, the people I'd protected were the ones gutting Atlas from within. Betrayal wasn't the word for it. This was a calculated execution, planned and signed months in advance. Grief sank deeper into my bones, but it didn't break me. It hardened into something else. I drove to the cemetery the next morning, the air thick with the smell of fresh grass and rain. My mother's gravestone was still new, the earth soft where they'd laid her to rest. I knelt, pressed my hand to the stone, and whispered words no one else would hear. "They ended your son, now I'll end their empire." Back in the vault, I mapped out my strike. Revenge wasn't enough. I didn't just want Evelyn ruined. I wanted Atlas dismantled from its core to its foundations. I cataloged the evidence: transaction trails, falsified reports, contract diversions masked as community funds. I traced the money flows, pinpointed the weak spots, and drafted a plan to unravel them in days. The strike had to be precise. A sloppy attack would only invite suspicion, and suspicion meant deniability. What I needed was collapse, undeniable, irreversible. I prepared 3 data packages, each encrypted and time-locked. One for federal regulators, one for financial oversight groups, one for the media. Each held pieces of the puzzle, damning on their own but devastating together. Still, I kept the sharpest weapon back. On a separate drive, I stored the full archive, every dirty deal, every offshore account, every compromised executive. I'd use it when the moment was right, not to expose them, but to ensure their destruction was absolute. The monitors glowed in the dark, code streaming as the systems compiled. It was a rhythm I knew better than my own pulse. 30 years of silence, patience, and discipline poured into one quiet night. Atlas had taken everything from me, erased my career, my name, and thought it was done. They believed the mask they'd forced on me was all I was. They were wrong. By sunrise, the packages were ready. Fail-safe set, releases scheduled, traces wiped so clean not even the system's architects could find me. I leaned back, watching the countdown timers tick down like fuses waiting to ignite. The grief that had weighed me down was gone. In its place was focus. I'd built the locks on their doors. Now I held the keys. This wouldn't just be revenge. This would be annihilation. The storm began quietly. No chaos, no rage, no warning. Just the soft click of a mouse in a dark room as I sent the first package. The encrypted files left my vault through a dozen masked relays, each fragment splitting and reassembling before reaching its target. Desks of federal regulators desperate for a crack in Atlas's armor. Another set went to watchdog groups hungry for corporate blood. A third landed in the inbox of a journalist who'd know the weight of the material but could never trace it back to me. They each got enough to spark the first flame. But the full archive, the heart of the corruption, I kept locked away. That wasn't for exposure. That was for leverage. While the files spread like wildfire, I moved to the second phase. Atlas's CEO, a man who built his image on grand speeches and staged philanthropy, guarded his accounts like treasure. He believed in strong defenses, but he forgot who designed the keys. Within an hour, I was inside his private folders, travel plans, hidden accounts, emails with board members arranging trades before public filings. Textbook insider schemes. I didn't need to fabricate anything, just place the right threads in front of the right eyes and let the law take over. Alarms started pinging in the background, systems flagging transactions as suspicious. Regulators would sense blood within hours. The board, scrambling to save themselves, would turn on each other before the day ended. By noon, the market reacted. Atlas stock dipped, then plummeted. A few vague reports surfaced online, enough to rattle investors already jittery in a fragile economy. Screens flashed red across trading floors. Phones went unanswered in offices I'd once roamed freely. Decades of carefully crafted image crumbled in less than half a day, and no one knew why. But watching from afar wasn't enough. I needed to see her. The woman who thought my loyalty was a switch she could flip off with a smirk. Evelyn Harcourt, the architect of my erasure. I found her in a restaurant where a single dish cost more than most families' weekly groceries. The kind of place with leather-bound wine lists and walls of imported stone. She sat in a corner booth with a colleague, laughing lightly, her glass of Chardonnay catching the chandelier's glow. Her laugh was too polished, too sharp. She was celebrating, likely thinking she'd finally removed the last hurdle to her empire. I watched from across the room, then walked over and slid into the booth across from her. She blinked, caught off guard, then smirked like she'd seen a ghost she thought she'd buried. "Robert," she said, "you look worn out." I leaned forward, voice steady, precise. "Do you remember what you said when I asked for a few days with my dying mother?" Her smirk flickered just slightly. "I don't recall. You said everyone's got their issues." I let the words hang heavy. "Well, Evelyn, yours are about to start." I reached into my pocket and placed a small flash drive on the white tablecloth between us. The silverware caught the light, glinting like a knife. Her eyes flicked to it, then back to me, narrowing. She laughed, sharp and forced. "What's this? Some kind of threat? You think you can intimidate me with trinkets?" I didn't respond. I just sat there watching her try to summon the confidence she wielded like a shield. Then her phone buzzed. Once, twice, then relentlessly. A flood of alerts she couldn't ignore. She glanced down, expecting something minor, but her face paled as the notifications kept coming. Regulatory inquiries, market crashes, emergency board calls, the first whispers of criminal probes. She looked up at me, panic fighting to stay hidden behind her facade. I gave her a faint smile. "Consider it the invoice for 30 years of loyalty. Payment due now." She opened her mouth, maybe to argue, maybe to plead. But I was already sliding out of the booth. I walked past the maitre d', past the gleaming bottles behind the bar, past the diners oblivious to the collapse of an empire. Outside, the city air carried the faint wail of sirens, the shouts of suited men trying to contain a fire too big to stop. Across the street, black SUVs pulled up to Atlas's regional offices. Agents in dark coats streamed through the doors. I didn't look back at her. I didn't need to. Evelyn Harcourt's empire was crumbling in real time, and she was chained to the throne as it burned. The world moved faster than I expected. By the next morning, Atlas consolidated, dominated every newsfeed. Headlines screamed about fraud, insider trading, and systemic corruption. Photos of executives being escorted into black cars under flashing cameras looped on every channel. Evelyn Harcourt's name was everywhere, plastered above words like conspiracy and criminal investigation. She didn't look like the smug woman I'd faced in the restaurant. She looked small, trapped, stripped of the power she'd once worn like a tailored suit. The board issued a statement denying knowledge, but it was too late. Investors were dumping shares faster than the market could handle. Atlas's value, built on a facade of stability, was collapsing in real time. Decades of work, billions in assets, thousands of careers, burning down in a fire they'd ignited themselves. My role in it was invisible, hidden behind walls no one could trace. To the world, it looked like Atlas had buckled under its own lies. To me, it was the cleanest operation I'd ever run. Still, watching it unfold wasn't satisfaction. Not exactly. 30 years of my life had been poured into those walls. Every late night, every sacrifice, every silent choice. No one knew I made, all reduced to ashes, but they were never mine to keep. The company had never been mine, just as my loyalty had never truly been theirs. I was a shadow they'd borrowed, and now they'd forgotten the cost. That afternoon, I drove to the cemetery. The sky was clear, a bright blue that felt cruel against the weight I carried. The grass had grown in fully since the funeral. The headstone stood sharp and clean against the earth. I walked up slowly, holding something I'd carried too long. My Atlas badge. The plastic was worn, edges scuffed, the logo fading from years of use. For 3 decades, it had been my identity, my access, my proof of existence. Now it was just a relic. I crouched by her grave, tracing the carved letters of her name. "They took my career," I whispered, voice low but steady. "You gave me my life. This was always for you." I placed the badge against the stone, pressing it down like an anchor. Then I stayed, silent, listening to the wind through the trees. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for orders or planning the next move. I was just present. As the sun sank lower, I stood and walked back to my car. The weight I carried wasn't gone, but it had shifted. Revenge had been necessary, inevitable, but it wasn't the end. What lingered now was release, true closure. That night, back in my house, I shut down the vault. One by one, the monitors went dark, the servers falling silent. The room felt strange without the hum of constant vigilance, almost unfamiliar. I locked the door behind me and told myself I didn't need to return. The work was done, the war was over, but ghosts never rest completely. Around midnight, as I sat in the quiet living room with only the clocks ticking, my secure line buzzed. A channel dormant for years, one no one should have remembered. I hesitated, then opened it. A single message blinked on the screen, ready for redeployment. I stared at it for a long time. The offer was tempting, like the pull of an old habit you know you should resist. Another mission, another identity. Another war. For 30 years I'd answered calls like that without pause, but not this time. My hand hovered over the keyboard, then moved to the power button instead. I smiled faintly as the message faded into darkness, the screen going black for good. For the first time in 30 years, I wasn't anyone's employee.